Welcome to Billing Management and Cost Control. My name is Keith Jarrett, and I lead AWS Cost Management, Product Marketing, and Business Intelligence. So I've been with AWS for about 7 years, and my job has really been focused on working with customers to help them understand the financial and the business impact of adopting AWS. And most recently, I've been really focused on working with customers to help them understand how to instill cloud financial management best practices across their organization so they can do a better job of managing, predicting, and optimizing their spend. So now I've introduced a little bit about me. Let me quickly introduce you to you. All right, so this session is one that will be particularly helpful for those folks out there who are working across their company to manage or optimize your IT spend. That could mean that you're specifically in a cloud financial management or FinOps role. That could mean that you're part of the IT finance or procurement side of the house. Or that could mean that you're an application or a business owner that are looking for ways to get more cost control, right? Or just get finance equipment bugging you, right? Or maybe you're here by mistake and you clicked on the wrong session, but that's okay. More the merrier. We got a lot of great things to talk about, and we hope you stick around. All right, so for those of you who are a little bit less familiar with the concept of cloud financial management, we think about it really in 4 key areas. It's see, save, plan, and run. Right? So first, how do we have the necessary visibility into our cost and usage to meet and make sure that we understand our reporting and analytic needs? Right? And once we have that visibility, how do we understand and identify opportunities to lower or optimize our cloud spend? And third, how do we adopt budgeting and planning processes that can be more agile and predictive, right? And finally, how do we manage all of this at scale, right? How do we establish the necessary guardrails and ensure that we're rapidly innovating, but avoiding unnecessary cost surprises along the way? So there are a lot of great resources for each of these specific areas, including breakout sessions on cost allocation, on optimization, and on IT planning. But for today, I want to dive into 2 specific areas of our cloud financial management framework and talk about how we can put some of these controls in place to better manage our bills. All right, so we'll talk about 4 areas specifically. Right? 1, how do we establish basic guardrails to ensure that we're not slowing down our builders, right? But that all of our building innovation is really in line with the broader goals of our business, right? And second, speed and innovation are great, but I've never talked to a CFO that wants to be surprised by their bill, right? So how do we avoid those type of billing surprises, right? And third, we'll talk about how customers are successful setting and tracking budgets for variable cloud usage. And then finally, we'll talk about tips for how to dial up your control over cloud purchasing, right? Which will really be a great area for those of you who are either working in procurement or sourcing, or for those of you who work with those teams. All right, so without further ado, I say we dive in. All right, and let's start at the beginning, right? Let's start by talking about how to set the right guardrails, right? And balance speed of innovation with cost governance. Because at the core of cloud management really inherently lies attention, right? Which is, how do we design a culture within our organization that enables better cost management while maintaining the velocity of innovation and building in the cloud? And so customers who are familiar with traditional physical hardware procurement processes are used to managing IT costs a certain way, right? And with traditional hardware procurement, you have a relationship between your technology teams and your finance and procurement teams and your supply chain, which is relatively transactional or linear, right? Engineers ask for what they need. Our procurement can act as a centralized approver to manage costs and vendors. And then we go through this lengthy process to stand up and rack and stack our gear. And then all of a sudden with the cloud, all of that has suddenly changed, right? So to get to that place where we're rapidly innovating while balancing costs and risk management, right, we need to identify which activities and responsibilities can be decentralized across our organization, right? Meaning that everyone is going to be responsible for these set of activities versus which type of activities can be centrally managed. So underlying all of it really is this understanding that finance and technology teams need to start working closely together and as close to as real time as possible, right? And that these 2 teams are continually collaborating to deploy, operate, and optimize code, not just maintaining some sort of transactional relationship. So A centralized FinOps or cloud financial management team can help us establish policies that can be used company-wide to govern usage, enable effective cost reporting, and even help collectively manage monetary commitments, whether that means purchasing RIs or savings plan to maximize our savings, or helping with other contract management. And perhaps most importantly, right, they can help us start instilling a culture of cost consciousness across the rest of the organization, right, helping ensure that our cloud financial management is as decentralized as possible across our business. So again, we've talked to a number of CFOs and a number of financial leaders, right? And while they're excited about the business transformation associated with the cloud, right, no one wants to be surprised by our bill, full stop. So they're looking to establish guardrails to ensure that they're not slowing down innovation, but at the same time that innovation is being done in a way that's consistent with the goals of the business. Right? And that's a process that starts by getting some of the basics right and answering some fundamental questions for your organization. Things like who should have access to resources, what kinds of resources, with tens or hundreds of accounts, how do we logically group accounts in a way that makes sense for the business? And similarly, when we look at resources within those accounts, how do we group costs and usage in a way that allows us to link costs back to teams, to services, or to our individual business units? And it's really something that starts with defining some central policies, right, to help us drive governance as we scale usage. And there are 3 services that are really critical to doing this at scale, right? And the first is AWS IAM, or Identity and Access Management. And IAM provides granular control to manage user access specific to services using permissions, right? And that could be as simple as who can spin up or terminate a specific EC2 or RDS instance. It could be who can read the contents of an S3 bucket. But with IAM, you can specify permissions like specific users and who can access specific resources and services, and the kinds of actions they can perform and which resources are available. And so, for example, again, you can determine who has access to specific resources. And then with CloudTrail, you can keep logs of these types of activities, which makes it easier to keep tabs on API level activity and stay compliant, right? And then with AWS organizations, as customers grow and scale on AWS, they're often looking for ways that they can do better management of their accounts, right? The number of accounts that they manage may be growing, and it may be growing based on their usage. They may be adding accounts to organize usage by development environment or to meet security and compliance needs, right? But AWS organizations allows customers to programmatically manage and create their accounts. So you can create groups of accounts which are called organizational units, and then we can apply policies to those groups that essentially control the use of AWS resources, again, down to the API level. And by organizing accounts into organizational units, you can apply service control policies to create targeted governance for your specific OUs or organizational unit. Okay, so after we've established our IAM and security service control policies, right, the AWS Billing Console can help us start applying controls, specifically the way we view and manage our bill. Right, in the Billing Console, you can look across all your accounts and resources to do things like understand our spend and usage trends, right, to configure our billing and payment preferences, or to designate rules for how to logically group our usage and cost with the use of cost categories, or to set preferences or rules for sharing discounts across accounts. And so the Billing Console is a way, as a central FinOps or IT finance team, to really start setting up some of the rules or guardrails across your organization. Right? It should be your first stop in CFM to lay the groundwork, right, before diving into specific services like AWS Cost Explorer, or cost and usage reports, or AWS Budgets. Okay, so now we've laid some of the groundwork with basic cost governance. Let's talk about how customers are able to evolve their budgeting process to be more cloud native, right? Because when it comes to costs and usage, especially variable cost and usage, businesses need to set, reset, and manage expectations around costs, right? Planning and forecasting in its most basic form is really about how do we not get surprised by our bill, right? But the larger opportunity, I think, is really, how do we think about using cloud to actually improve business and financial predictability? Not just think about AWS as a change agent for technical digital transformation, but also financial and business transformation. So We've talked a little bit about the procurement process associated with physical hardware already, right? It's slow, right? But despite being slow, from a finance perspective, that speed actually offers some predictability, right? And with variable usage, we have the opportunity to strip out waste and move quicker, but it certainly requires us to revisit the way we do certain things like forecasting, not just how we find the right tool, but how we design the right process to work across teams to understand what application or business owners are planning next week or next month. Right? Things like monitoring, right? Establishing basic tracking mechanisms to monitor our usage, our cost, our spend efficiencies, and to receive alerts when we're trending in the wrong direction. Right? Reporting, making sure that we're creating the right financial reports or disseminating across our organization to our business leaders, and ultimately that we're using data to make informed purchasing decisions. And then finally, responding, right? Which is so much to say, with all this visibility, what are we going to do with it, right? Making sure that we have the right mechanisms in place for automated responses when our budgets are at risk, that we're enforcing our IAM or security policies, and that we have the ability to customize our response based on the context of what's happening. So planning isn't just about getting a number, right? Like, what are we going to spend next month? It's really about setting the guardrails and making sure that we're continuously monitoring how we're progressing against our goals as a business. We launched AWS Budgets back in 2015 to help predict and track cost and usage. Right? And Budgets has come a long way since that first launch, and we'll talk about some of the advancements here in a few slides, but in a nutshell, AWS Budgets allows customers to set custom budgets that will alert you when your costs and usage exceed or are forecasted to exceed your budgeted amount. So you can use AWS Budgets to additionally set reservation or savings plan utilization and coverage targets, and similarly receive alerts when your utilization drops below the threshold you're defining. So customers can set and track budgets on a daily, monthly, quarterly, or annual granularity. And with Budgets, you can integrate with additional multiple services like Cost Explorer, right? So you can easily view and analyze your cost and usage driver. AWS Chatbot, so you can receive budget alerts in designated Slack channel or Amazon Chime Room. And AWS Service Catalog, so you can track your costs on your approved AWS portfolio and services. And one of the things we've heard from customers is, alerts are great, right? But in order to drive change or instill control in my bill, I need to go beyond just a notification. I need to be able to act, and I need to be able to do it at scale. So in October, we launched AWS Budgets to help budget actions to do just that. And AWS Budgets will now allow you to configure actions, which are specific responses to cost and usage in your account, that will be applied automatically or on a workflow approval process once a budget target has been exceeded. And so there are 3 types of actions you can take: identity and access management policies, service control policies, or stop running instances, whether that means an EC2 or RDS instance. And we'll talk more about this in a second. But we think that's going to be a really powerful solution for customers, not only to help control costs, but also to help enforce the groundwork that we talked about earlier, right? Helping reinforce our IAM and service control policies to ensure that spend is consistent with the goals of the business. All right, so let's take a look at how to set up your own budget action. And for the sake of time, I'm going to assume that folks have some level of familiarity with how to set up your own budget. But for those who aren't, there's a lot of great information available on the AWS Budget product page to help you get started. But for today, I want to walk through how we apply budget actions to an existing budget. So, all right, so here I am. I'm midway through setting up my new budget. I've gone through and I've selected my budget type. I've set my budget, and now I'm on the 3rd step to configure or define my threshold. So a quick note about thresholds here before we get too far into setting up our actions, because a lot of customers find it helpful to set up multiple thresholds per budget. Meaning, for example, I could set up a threshold based on when my forecasted costs are expected to exceed my budget, or I could set up an additional threshold to alert me based on my actual cost, saying, hey Keith, just want to let you know you've reached 80% of your budget, beware, right? Or I could set up an additional threshold based on my additional costs saying, okay Keith, now you've officially hit your budget, so that I can set up these type of a tiered notification system by adding additional thresholds so that I'm never surprised. So once we've defined our thresholds,
Then we can set up our notifications and add our email recipients to let us know who should be receiving these alerts. So once I've set up my threshold, I've designated my email recipients, right? Now I can go ahead and add a budget action. And what you'll notice is after I click add budget action, all right, my first step here is to select an IAM rule with pre-configured permissions here to allow budgets to execute that action. Once I've done that, I can select what type of action I want to take, right? Whether it's IAM policies, meaning when a budget threshold is crossed, moving specific users from admin permissions to read-only, right? Basically a way to say, Keith, you've used your entire budget, right? So we're not going to let you spin up additional resources here until we figure out what in the heck's going on, right? Or service control policies, meaning for those customers who are using AWS organizations, we can apply actions to an entire organizational unit by moving them from admin to read-only, right? Again, let's say that our developer sandbox has collectively reached our budget, right? This would be a way for us to help enforce those budgets to those OUs, right? Or third, I can choose to stop EC2 and RDS instances. All right, so let's take a look at what stopping resources would look like. Right, and the first step here is going to be to designate whether we want to stop EC2 instances or RDS. Once we've done that, we can select our region. We can select the instances that we want to target. All right, say I select my 3 dev servers. And then as a last step here, we can determine whether we want to apply this action automatically or in a more manual approval workflow basis. All right, and I want to pause here because this is a really important step. All right, this is a super powerful capability, so we actually recommend using an approval workflow here rather than an automated one, at least initially. All right, and what will happen is you'll receive an email letting you know that your threshold was crossed and that you have a pending action. All right, and you can click here to go to the console in order to take that action. All right, and then the next time you go to the console, you'll see a button. It will say, do you want to execute this action? And then you can click to take that action. Right. The other option is to do this in a more automated basis, which again is a super powerful capability and super powerful option. So you'll want to be careful of that, especially for production environments. All right. So we strongly recommend start with a manual approval workflow, especially at first. And once we've done that, we can confirm our budget, and then we're done. That's it. That's AWS budget actions. All right. And we think it's going to be a really powerful tool for customers to go beyond just alerts, to start enforcing cost controls across their organizations.
So now that we've talked about setting guardrails and setting and managing budgets, let's drill down into an area we started early on, which is how do we avoid cost surprises without slowing down our builders? I think it's a conversation that really starts by first understanding that not all surprises are created equal, right? There are good surprises, like, hooray, I spent less than I expected. And then there are obviously not so good surprises. And so when we spend more than we expected, even then, not all surprises are created equal. All right, so consider a scenario where we exceed our budget because our business is growing, right? Is that okay? Right? Or consider a scenario where we're spending below our budget, but we're still having spending surprises that, although they're not triggering our budget alerts, are still unexpected, right? Is that okay? And the short answer here is, as any mediocre economist will tell you, it really depends, right? It depends on your organization. It depends on the context. It just depends, right? So what we need is more contextualized understanding of what is normal, right? Or what is not normal for each of our businesses. And that's really the idea behind AWS Cost Anomaly Detection. And in September, we launched AWS Cost Anomaly Detection, which I'm really, really excited about. All right, because anomaly detection is a machine learning backed service that will help proactively detect cost and usage surprises that's contextualized for each and every customer based on your own spending patterns. And to make the alerting capability even more impactful, each alert comes with its own root cause analysis to provide you with a roadmap for how to go resolve the issue, right? Really helpful. And despite being powered by sophisticated machine learning, fortunately for all of us, that doesn't require deep learning from our perspective to use, right? Customers can get started really quickly, really easily in 3 clicks, right? And perhaps just as compelling, it's free, right? So there's really no reason not to try it out. So I want to show how this works in action, right? But before we do so, I want to get a little wonky and provide a little additional color on how the service actually works. And to do that, I want to look at an example of what we mean by contextualized spend analysis. So consider that I have a quote unquote normal daily spend that ranges from $50 to $100 per day. If I look at this chart of what my actual daily spend does over the course of 8 months, you'll notice that it generally stays within that range. But you'll also notice that I have periodic spikes, in fact, 17 of them. And when you get these types of spikes, right, you might be asking yourself, is this good? Is this bad? Is it expected? Is it not? Right? Which of these spikes do I actually investigate? Right? So what AWS Cost Anomaly Detection does is create contextualized spending patterns that account for seasonal variability based on your historic spend, right? It may say, based on a year's worth of data, it turns out that 7 of these spikes are actually predictable, right? Because we see large spikes on the first of the month. We also see significant decreases on the weekend, right? And so the model uses this spend history to determine what is quote unquote expected. And now that we have a model that says what should our spend should be, or what our predicted spend should be, right? Now we can use the difference between our actuals and our forecasted to come up with a residual value, which you're seeing below, right? Meaning how far off were we from what was expected, right? And what we'll see is that not all spikes are anomalies, right? And not all anomalies are spikes, right? So let's take a look at February as an example, right? We see that there's a lot of chatter in my daily spending levels that you can see in the chart above. But when we look at the residual values below, we'll see that we have 2 anomalies that actually trigger our statistical threshold, right? And that's what's interesting because about these anomalies, when we compare the residual values to the actual spend, and what you'll notice is that our actual spending was pretty flat during that time period, right? The reason for the anomaly was actually because our spend was expected to decrease over the weekend, but didn't, right? Thus the anomaly. So even though our spending didn't increase, it was still an anomaly for us based on what is normal.
Okay, so now that we've got a sense for how anomaly detection works, let's actually dive into the console and take a look at how to use the service. So first things first, you can find anomaly detection on the navigation menu on the left side of the cost management console. And once on the overview page, you can see that I already have some anomalies detected. All right, at the top of the page, we have an anomaly detection summary, followed by a breakout of individual anomalies detected over the last 90 days, followed by a section for what we call cost monitors. Right? And these monitors are the specific models that we're using across your environment to track for unusual spend. Right? And you can see here that we have a button that we can use to create an additional monitor. So let's go ahead and give that a try, and we'll walk through that. So customers can choose from one of 4 monitors, right? AWS services, linked accounts, cost categories, or cost allocation tags. And for most customers, AWS services should be all that we need. That said, some of you may want to go beyond just services to look at unusual spending across your organization, whether that is looking at specific business units, teams, dev environments, or applications. So we can use linked accounts, cost categories, and cost allocation tags to do that depending on how we've organized or allocated costs and usage across our organization. So again, for most use cases, AWS services should work. I've already set that up for my account here, so let's go ahead and walk through what it looks like to set up a linked account monitor. And the first step here is selecting account IDs. And a quick aside here is that I can set up multiple monitors for individual linked accounts depending on who owns each of these accounts, right? So I could set up a monitor to send alerts to Keith for an Insights demo or Juan for his account. So once I select my linked account, I can then designate what my alert thresholds to be. So a quick note on the alert thresholds, right? Anomaly detection is going to capture all anomalies regardless of size, right? But this threshold is really specifically telling us when we want to be notified about those anomalies, right? Knowing that some anomalies are more impactful than others and warrant interruption into our daily lives. So for some of you, that may be $10, others $100, or even still some, maybe even $1,000. And then we can designate what our alerting frequency is. All right, do we want to be alerted from a daily summary, a weekly summary, or individual alerts? And then add recipients and name our monitor. Then we can click create monitor, and we're off, right? So now we've created a monitor. Let's take a look at what this looks like in practice. So when we go back to our overview page, let's take a look at our anomalies detected section. And here I can see that I have a number of anomalies that are detected over the last 90 days. And here we've broken it up and categorized it by different areas. And the first is detection date. Second is severity, meaning how impactful the event was, not from a cost perspective, but from a statistical significance perspective based on your historic spend patterns. Right? Then duration, how long did the anomaly last? Service, meaning which resources were driving the anomaly. Account ID, where the anomaly is taking place, and then total cost impact. So let's quickly just dive in here and take a look at what one of these looks like. So first, what you'll see in the anomaly detail page is that at the top we have a submit assessment button, right? And this is to say we can designate whether this was a quote unquote true positive or not. And when I click this, you can see that I can designate whether it was an accurate anomaly, what we call a false positive, or that it was an anomaly, but it's not an issue. Yes, it was an anomaly, but we expected it, meaning maybe we're launching a service that day. And what we'll do is we'll use this data to continue improving our machine learning models, right, to better understand your spend patterns and continue to improve our alerting capabilities. So going back to our anomaly detail page, right, we can start kind of diving deeper. We can look at our potential root causes. And here we've identified a couple potential root causes. The first is RDS in a specific account, in a specific region, and specific usage type. And here we can start diving deeper by viewing this in Cost Explorer. And I can click this View in Cost Explorer button, and what it will do is it will push me to Cost Explorer. It will apply all the appropriate filters in place. So we're just looking at this root cause. So I can dive deeper here to kind of figure out what's going on. And here I can see that my spend went from nothing to something. And so from here, from Cost Explorer, I can start diving into exactly what's going on and how I can rectify it. So that's it. That's cost anomaly detection. We think it's going to be a really impactful tool for customers to add to their toolbox to help avoid these type of cost surprises going forward.
Okay, so now we come to our last topic, which is really for those of you who may work in procurement or those of you who work directly with those teams, right? Gaining control over purchasing. So again, we talked about how procurement processes are changing, right? And that's especially impacting the way a specific process, or what we call P2P, or procurement to pay, right? Procure to pay. And P2P is the process of selecting a vendor, negotiating a contract, generating a purchase order or a PO, and then processing the invoice, and then finally paying. All right? And traditional processes here work well for traditional hardware, but it can be difficult to do things like integrate your cloud billing with ERP systems, or map purchase orders to invoices to do basic reconciliation. And that's really the idea behind AWS Purchase Order Management. It requires us to be able to adapt our cloud procurement processes to be able to integrate or play well with these existing systems and processes. And we launched AWS Purchase Order Management back in October to help provide customers with a single pane of glass to view and manage all of your purchase orders, as well as define mapping of purchase orders to invoices, and to manage the status of each process, each purchase order, track the balance and expiration, and set notification preferences to keep individuals informed about PO expiration and balance depletion. So those of you who are looking to better manage your P2P process, it can be a really, really valuable service to help. All right, so before we go, we got lots of great resources to get you started. Right? For those of you who are looking to continue learning, to dive deep, we have a lot of great educational, learning, and networking opportunities, starting with what we call Peer Connect. Our Peer Connect events are really, really great. These are specific events for cloud financial management or finance professionals to get together, to learn, and to network with one another. And we have lots of great service learnings and tailored CFM content through our cost management blog. And we have a new CFM specific training, which is called Cloud Financial Management for Builders. And I encourage you all to take a look at these great resources. And then finally, we've talked about 3 new tools you can add to your toolbox: AWS Budget Actions, Cost Anomaly Detection, and Purchase Order Management. So I encourage you to check out each service, visit our product page. We've got a lot of great learning and educational material, and give them a try. And so with that, I'll thank you all for attending. Thank you for your time, and please don't forget to complete your session survey.